Hey there folks, it's me TheTacticalBrit, and a new community broadcast has been brought about by the community managers over at Battlefield. Now, today I wanted to have a look at this. I'll be honest with you, it's one of those broadcasts that perhaps confirms things we basically already knew. It's a bit of a filler, a void filler in my personal opinion. But with that being said, you know, DICE did have to say something about what was coming, and we finally have at least something, or at least an inkling of an idea of what is going to be happening. Now, this community broadcast has some stuff specifically that I want to talk about, and some things that I just downright disagree with. So let's dive into it. I think it's just worth diving into and analysing. Now, before I get underway, again, I like specifying that this is a purely constructive video. It's not aimed to be some kind of witch hunt thing. I like to try and give constructive feedback about announcements, news, information, stuff that's happening in Battlefield 5, and the community managers especially are the messengers for this kind of stuff. They do their best to fight our corner, and I absolutely disagree with anybody who thinks that they're for any reason to blame with any gripes we have. Those guys do a fantastic job. So let's dive on in. So to start off with, the first thing that grabbed me here is that DICE have believed that they have improved the experience of players when they are being engaged at longer distances. Now, I will be honest with you, in some cases that is true, in other cases it is a little bit iffy. And they say that they've been investing a great deal of time into reviewing feedback and measuring it against behaviors that they've seen from players in-game to determine whether or not the changes they've actually made has positively impacted the gameplay experience for all. Now, there are a few things I want to pick up here. The first thing being that, you know, it's very, very subjective to say that they have improved things, and I think a lot of this is stemming, this entire little paragraph section here seems to stem from analytical data that developers have about the game, and, you know, this data is telling them so-and-so about so many things, engagements, telemetry, things like that, statistics that they need to know in order how to balance the game. Now, my big gripe with this is that statistics aren't everything. Statistics can't tell you everything about a game. You may be able to map where a player is and how much damage they do over range and you know, the statistical outcomes of certain engagements with the weapons they're using, but for the most part, in my opinion, I don't think that's a real measure of feeling in games. And I think a good example of this is that the Kilo 141 and M4 in Modern Warfare are two very similar weapons that operate in very similar ways, with main differences being accuracy and rate of fire. But in all honesty, they feel quite different. Even though they aren't statistically very different, they feel different and they feel good, even though one of them is advantageous in certain situations and the other one isn't. But I think it's safe to say most weapons after this update just don't feel good. They don't feel lethal. They feel like there's some kind of... The best way I could describe it would be like crossing a finish line, but then the finish line sort of slingshots you back into place, you know? You feel like you've lined up this guy, you feel like you've fired 3 bullets, and that should be it if you're using, I don't know, a semi-auto rifle. But maybe on 1 or 2 of those occasions he's a little bit further away and he doesn't die, or the balancing changes have rejigged some things and he hasn't died. Or you're using an assault rifle and it's taken a few more bullets than you anticipated, and that kind of experience becomes very frustrating. And when players are presented with feelings in games, feelings of how guns operate, they start realizing things. For example, Battlefield 5 has become flooded with high rate of fire weapons and high damage weapons such as single shot rifles, SWOMEs, Type 2As, purely because people are understanding, even if they don't play the game enough to be vocal about these subjects, the high rate of fire weapons are killing them, and high damage output weapons are killing them, and they seem to be working best for those who are a bit more active, because they know that these changes have been made. And when you start entering towards that meta, I highly disagree that you create an environment where engagement ranges feel good. I highly disagree that statistics are creating an environment where weapons are being balanced and being used in ways that I think relates to a cohesive environment. Battlefield was entirely built up on this whole physicalism idea, and you know, now it takes more bullets from an STG to kill somebody than a grease gun, and stuff like that can become very confusing, and range balancing and stuff like that can become very confusing as well. So the lack of lethality at range, I think, is starting to disappoint some people, which is why this kind of new meta of close quarters, high rate of fire zerging seems to come about. Like I say, they are listening to feedback, which is good. We'll probably hear some more about it in the future, but for me it just seems really strange. It seems very strange to rip up the old playbook that was the old TTK, write an entirely new one, and then introduce new weapons like the Type 2A and grease gun, and then seemingly just kind of make make it up as you go along. Admittedly, balancing a game is quite like that, but you know, when you say your design is X, we want to make sure the game is balanced at ranges, and then you release a gun like the Type 2A, which shreds people up to 25 meters. Same with the grease gun, in my opinion. It's just like, well, what are you choosing then? Like, are you balancing the game, or are you choosing, you know, is it determinism, so to speak? Is it predetermined that if I use a Type 2A at 25 meters, I will always win? Because that is the current situation we find ourselves in, and it's very, very unlikely for any other gun to triumph in that kind of scenario. A good piece of news from this, though, and perhaps something that they've recognized, is that they are changing the damage drop-offs on things such as semi-automatic rifles, because they just don't feel like how they look. And apparently similar changes are planned for MGs and ARs, and they will update us before the final shippable state comes about. But again, you know, I like this change. I feel like maybe it's a bit of statistics. Maybe they are recognizing that some things just don't seem to quite make sense. But again, I do just wonder, you know, you have this old time to kill that you really do understand very well. So why throw that in the shredder, write something new, and then try and figure out this new one all over again? It just seems like an extra step that was a bit unnecessary. Now, they say in Update 6.2 they'll be launching further changes to the game to address stuff on our feedback and game data, but in short, most of the things in close quarters, such as recoil, rate of fire, that you were previously accustomed to, will return. So in effect, anything after the 5.2.2 time to kill change is still going to be there. And again, it just really, like, what I don't understand about this is mind-blowing in my opinion, is like, I understand balancing a game like this is complex and difficult, but you've stated that the average engagement range of Battlefield 5 is 22 meters. And then suddenly we have two new weapons which seem to just dominate up until 22 meters. If that is the average engagement range, yeah, sure, a grease gun isn't going to kill me at 50 meters, and that's the setback. But if you know the statistical average is 22 meters, why create two weapons that are just entirely good at 22 meters? It just doesn't seem to... It doesn't gel well with me. Like, information like this doesn't gel well with me because it feels like there's a bit of a design conflict. It feels like somebody is saying, we need balancing over range, and somebody else is saying, yeah, but here's these guns that will definitely kill people up to 30 meters. And there's no real line here where it just seems to make sense. You know, you could adjust the Type 2A and try and make it balanced within that 22 meter category, and you can adjust the grease gun. But if you know the averages and statistics already, introducing these weapons in the first place is problematic in my opinion. Chapter 6 will focus on a new map, new weapons, and new gadgets. Likely some of the gadgets that were going to come before, but will be coming. There's also going to be some vehicle balancing changes as well. So very much a good... My predictions of what I thought would happen are happening. It just seems to be a little bit... You know, it's one of those statements that is... It tells us things are happening, but, you know, from the outside in, we can't tell. I'm sure there's plenty of stuff and discussions going on over at DICE, but it's just very difficult to extrapolate what they mean behind this, and I kind of wish they'd share more data with us. Like, if it is truly the case that some weapons are just overpowered at certain ranges, share that data with us, make us understand that data. Because at the moment it seems like we have a design direction and we have just conflicting ideals. And I think, you know, people are using the Type 2A because it's reminiscent of the old time to kill. It's roughly the same number of seconds, give or take, an STG probably would have taken to kill somebody back then. And that for me is concerning, because if people are gravitating towards these weapons within that 22 meter engagement range, perhaps that's telling you something about how lethal weapons feel and whether or not they actually feel correct in the first place. So yeah, I'm a little bit conflicted about this statement. Truth be told, like, there's a final sort of be-all and end-all of this entire thing, and I haven't just dragged this out for 10 minutes, because if I did, there'd be 2 ad breaks, but there's only one. The thing is, for me, right, is that we're constantly being told about, you know, why the old time to kill perhaps didn't work, why the new one is what they're going with, but there's never really been much to dig our teeth into, you know? I really want to try and understand these changes more, but there's so many conflicting things, like so many conflicting choices, like the Type 2A being introduced. Yes, it's new content, which is great, but if it's new content that directly conflicts the idea of damage over range and trying to create a balanced environment, then that just seems to confuse me a little bit. And I really want to understand some of the ethoses and philosophies and game data behind this stuff. And I'm sure that's quite difficult to always share, and I totally get that. But with stuff like Synthic no longer being a thing, or, you know, steadily, I think they're trying to get back on their feet, it's just really annoying to try and understand these changes without understanding the game data behind it, and whether or not the game data is even a good thing to use. Because if we saw the game data and it said, you know, the STG is the most wonderful thing in the world, I can safely tell you here and now, when you actually use it in-game based on how roughly inaccurate it's going to be amongst other things, it probably isn't, but the statistics will tell you otherwise, and I think that kind of approach could become an issue for DICE if they're basing everything on statistics. There's no such thing as a perfectly balanced game. It doesn't exist, and games like Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 were widely successful even though there were weapons that were just statistically superior. The M16A3, for example, probably shouldn't have existed in terms of creating a balanced environment. But that weapon and the gunplay in Battlefield 3 in general was what made that game special, and it's what made Battlefield 5 special. So that's the thing here. You can't create a perfectly balanced environment. So why not just give us an environment that feels good? Anywho folks, that's it from me, the Tactical Brit. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching.